There's no better way to get your adult staff to buy into your camp and your culture than to have their kids attending your camp and drinking your Kool-Aid. That said, there's lots of ins and outs and lots of positives and a whole lot of negatives, and it's sort of a day camp thing. So let's explore it with our guests, Joe Smith and Jay Milde. This is the Day Camp Pod. Welcome back to the Day Camp Podcast. I'm Andy Pritikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philly suburbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake Park District, Crystal Lake, Illinois.
And we are joined today by two awesome people, Day Camp pros. We've got Joe Smith from Camp Spark and Jay Milde from Breezemont Day Camp. How you doing, guys?
Doing well. Thank you for having us.
It is our pleasure to have you here. So we got an interesting topic that is definitely a day camp thing. And this topic, I credit it to Joe Smith because he called me a couple of weeks ago and he said, Andy, what do you pay your camp parents that work there? And we had this long philosophical discussion. And I had this same discussion like a couple months earlier with Jay Milde at Breezemont when he was talking about all the camp parents that he has working for them. And it's an interesting philosophical thing. And it just led to a whole bunch of thoughts about the ins and outs of camp parents. And this summer, I actually tried to get a lot more concrete with my camp parents and really putting in parameters and putting in expectations to them, because there was a whole lot of, let's say, behaviors from them where I was just like, oh, they shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. And it's just like, oh, I never told them they should be doing that. So I sort of wrote it all out. And I'm going to put my letter to my staff parents into, they're not really staff parents. I was thinking about this. These are parents of staff who have children. That's what they are. But anyway, I'm going to upload that letter into the show notes so you guys can see what I did. But I wanted to talk about, what's good, what's bad about it, how we utilize it, and then the potholes that we fall in sometimes. So I want to start with you, Joe. Joe, can you tell us how you got to where you got to with Camp Spark and in your camp history?
As a counselor, as an actual camp staff person, was way back in 1979 at Camp Sussex in Sussex, New Jersey. It was a nonprofit camp for children who couldn't afford to go to other camps, and worked my way up that program, had every position there. Fast forward, I went back into camping probably full-time in 2009. I ran a camp for children and adults with special needs for Easter Seals in Rockaway, New Jersey. And then I went back to a rival camp 3 miles down the road from Sussex, was Camp Luema. And I was the director there for a couple of years. And then Master Chef came over from Spain, believe it or not. And they opened 2 programs, one in Georgia and one in Kent, Connecticut at the Kent School. And I was the director there, and then kind of got into some day camp opportunities. And this opportunity at Spark opened up. They were looking to start a new camp. They needed somebody and people and staff who had already done something from the ground up. And we started Spark back in 21 was our first summer. And we had about 50 campers a day in the middle of the pandemic. It was all about getting our name out. And
so you started your camp in 2021. That's pretty impressive.
Correct. I don't know who had the bright idea of doing it then, but it's worked out. And we went from 50 a day to a registration of over 300 the following summer, a registration of over 400 last summer. And if numbers are telling me what I think is going to happen this year, we'll probably come in between 500 and 600 campers. So
pretty awesome.
And the way that I explain it, to families, thank you, is we owe that to the staff. And so our staff just typically is older. We, out of 60, 65 counselors last year, I want to say maybe we had 3 that were in high school. Everybody else was college age, recently graduated, or professional in a field.
Gotcha.
But as it pertains to international staff, I mean, that's really the bread and butter for me, because I've had them at so many overnight opportunities that I couldn't wait to get to a day camp that provided the opportunity to bring in internationals. And because Spark is at basically a ice hockey training facility, and we fit our program there, we have 2 full-size ice rinks. We have international hockey players from all over the world that we're fortunate enough to be able to house them in these 2 large bed and breakfasts that we own down in Ocean Grove, New Jersey, on the shore. So it's about a 25-minute ride, and they are literally, one of the buildings is on the beach block of the Atlantic Ocean. So in my email, when I email potential international staff, I let them know that it is a complete turn on to them and an excitement for them. And I also tell them that you'll be 90 minutes train ride from New York City. And there's not many international staff that I've worked with at overnight camps that wouldn't jump on at doing something like that and having 2 days off instead of 1, right?
Yeah.
And having their evenings to themselves and not
Yeah, no,
sleeping with
it's a good
15
sell.
other campers.
It's a good sell. There's no doubt about it. So how do you utilize moms or dads with their kids at your camp? What
So
positions are they
they're
in?
always going to be, for me, in supervisory positions. They're going to be division heads. They're going to be specialists. They might work in the office, but at the end of the day, always in a supervisory thing. They're not going to be a counselor. We're not going to have their children be able to see them all the time. And then other campers say, I'd like my mommy or daddy here also. How come he or she gets to see their parents? But and they're great because they are buying into wanting to provide the same opportunity that they see their own children getting to other people's children. And that's a real driving thing for me. So it's not just, can my kid go for free if I work at your camp? I don't think it's ever been that at all.
Well, yeah, that is usually the thing. Although I do have to remember when I first started being a camp director at North Shore Day Camp, I remember this awesome lady. She ended up being one of our best division leaders. And I asked her the first question in the interview, like, why do you want to do this? You know? And she's like, simple. I ain't paying all this money for my 2 kids to come to camp. Plain and simple.
100%.
And she was totally honest. And by the way, she was great. So I didn't mind the the transparency. Yeah, tell us how you got to Breezemont.
Yeah, so I started off attending day camps, working day camps my entire life, pretty much from 3 years old to now. I loved it. My dad tried to send me to sleepaway, but I was having fun at day camp, so that's just kind of my thing. And when it came time for me to go off into the world and decide what I wanted to do for work, the only way that I could figure out that I could still be at camp over the summer is if I became a teacher. So I taught 7th grade social studies in Connecticut for 5-6 years, and then stumbled my way into the professional camping world. Very fortunate to be at Breezemont. I am the associate director and really head up all the staffing. So much like what Joe was talking about with having just a great staff of local people, we also hire some international staff members. It's a big part of our program as well that we love. And we also hire a number of parents to come and work at camp, and we utilize them in a variety of different roles.
So hold on. Before we get into that, how did you stumble?
Sorry,
and how did you stumble into day camping?
Well, I was working at, I decided to go and work at Breezemont over the summer. I had my summers off, and Gordon, the director and owner, we kind of clicked. And at one point he asked me if I wanted to join him full time. And that was, of course, the year I was becoming tenured at school. So that was a scary decision to leave. But
same thing with me. It's exactly what happened with me.
I jumped at the opportunity, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I remember that exact thing. I was like, all I need to do is work 1 day next September and I'll be set for life, you know? But at the time that I was teaching, back in the 90s, like it was easy certainly for a male to get a job in a school as a teacher, I felt. So I didn't, it was a risk, but it wasn't that much of a risk. I always felt like I could go back.
I felt it was worth the risk too, because like I was in Connecticut teaching. I really wanted to be in New York teaching. The benefits are just better. So I needed to leave there anyway. And to your point, like I figured like I'll be able to find something. But the reason I became a teacher in the first place, which my principal doesn't love when I tell this story, I'm still in touch with him, is just because I loved camp. I didn't really care if the kids knew their presidents and if they, were memorizing all this stuff. I cared about that. I wanted to help kids grow and develop, and I felt like I was able to do that both at camp and at school.
Got it. So how does Breezemont utilize moms and dads?
Yeah, so truly every position. Many of them are the supervisors, so supervisory roles, of course, but we pride ourselves on having an adult staff member in every single group to truly give those kids the care and attention that they deserve. As great as our 18-year-old staff members are, they might not know that that wasn't enough lunch at lunch, whereas a mother or father would. They might not realize, oh, you have to put on sunscreen more than twice a day, whereas a mother and father would. So we have an adult member of staff in every single group who is usually a mother or father.
Up until what grade?
Teacher.
Up until what grade?
Up until second grade. Third grade, we start having like really mature college age students. But those parents are also serving not only as the supervisor of the staff, the supervisor of those kids, but also in a communication manner, letting the parents know what's going on at camp, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Interesting.
We do also use some of our parent staff as specialists. They're able to bring some of their skills to the soccer field or to the art deck. So we definitely do have some really top tier specialists who come and work at camp, and their kids get to come as well.
Oh, that's awesome. What about you, Sam? What about the rec programs? How do you guys utilize moms and dads?
We have my before and after camp program has a lot of older adults because they're the early risers and they don't want to work all day or be quite as active. So they usually work extended camp time. But my directors and myself all had our kids go through camp. And over the years, I've run into the whole spectrum of I'm going to treat my own kid like we're at home, and or being so hard on your own child because you don't want to look like you're playing favorites. So I've had both ends of that happening. We generally try to have them not be with their director, depending on ours are age appropriate though. So we make sure whichever counselor they're assigned to, that they feel confident enough to tell the director if their child is misbehaving. Because that becomes an issue too. If they're going to say everything's good and the kid's a beast, I would be horrified if they didn't tell me that my child was, causing trouble. So,
yeah, well, we'll get into that. That's an interesting point of, you want to treat these kids like they're like everybody else, right? And you want to treat the staff like they're like everybody else. But you don't want you got to have a normal level of communication. So how do you explain to your staff like how to treat? So here's this mom that's in charge of a group of kindergartners, let's say, right? How do you explain to the staff of like the third grade boys that has this third grade boy that's her kid? Like, how do you explain the communication?
Let's see. We do try to, the directors communicate a lot. We do a lot of meetings together, and before we even are hired, we go into my horror stories of either end of the spectrum, and that's not going to be going on here. We can't have either end of that happening here. But it comes down to confidence of the staff with the third graders. Are they confident enough to treat him like anyone else and to talk to the parent who's at the Pee-wee camp or whatever when there is a problem? The other part of
well, hold on. So you're saying that that you are saying to the third grade counselors that they can go tell that kid's mom who's at swim right now that their kid's being a pain in the neck.
Only if it's an emergency
Only if it's an
situation.
emergency.
Otherwise,
Right.
they would be communicating at the end of camp just like any other parent.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
trying to get to, is that I
Sorry.
think that the standard needs to be
Yes.
that it's just like, you got to treat them like every other parent, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Jay, what's your blanket statement that you say as far as this communication like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it should be treated just as any other parent. A phone call, a email, however you're communicating with the rest of your families in the group, that should be the same way. As you said, in an event of an emergency, totally different story. But just as professional as you can to not only keep it fair for the other kids and for that one child, but also to I think that's the right thing to do by the staff member, because that staff member is trying to work, trying to instruct an activity, trying to run their own area.
Right.
It's just try to make it as fair as you can.
Yeah, no, we had a camp, we had a mom, that was a division leader, like one of the, head people at the camp. And when somebody would come to her and tell her about one of her two kids, she would look at them with a deadpan serious face and say, "Call my husband."
That's good.
which
Yeah.
was killer. All right, so at my camp, well, first of all, I used to work at North Shore Day Camp, which was a lot more like Jay's camp, and that was tons of preschoolers and tons of little kids. And we had that same policy where we had an adult, like meaning like a mom, in pretty much every group up through first grade. And in a way, it was good because of what Jay's saying, because it is what it is. Like, it's just you have a person with a lot of that kind of experience in the group, and the parents really like that to a degree. But also, it was a great savings at the time of payroll, because we were a struggling camp and we needed to keep our payroll down, and to have all these lines that were like zeros or 200 or 500 or whatever for all these staff. That was a huge savings. But then on the other hand, I turned around and was just like, oh my gosh, like we have like 100 staff kids here. Like, this is like crazy. Like, do you know how many staff kids you have, Jay?
It's more than 100. Yeah,
More than
probably
100.
about 125.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of staff kids.
We're in a very fortunate position where enrollment is still strong. So now I interviewed somebody today who has two children. They're amazing, but I might not have space for their two children. And, that's kind of puts me between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we've been doing the last couple of years, where enrollment's been so big, is we've had, like, as far as the numbers of kids we take per week per group, we have like a soft limit, and then we have a hard limit. So we first sort of close out at the soft limit, because we know we're going to hire a lot of parents. We know we're going to take on staff kids, and all we want to have a place for them, because that is a hard situation to be in, where there's this awesome person and they're like, yeah, my kids need to come all summer, or I can't do this. It's rough.
Yep.
With the park district too, we get all sorts of kids from different departments. So they're not working directly with them, but they get the same discounts as our staff do. And they can pop in anytime. It's, maintenance men for the whole park district, the arborist, you name it, their kids might be in camp and they might be trying to get special accommodations and whatnot.
That's interesting that you say that. We have what I think is the best head of maintenance that I've ever had in any facility. And he has 5 children. And I, from year one, took all 5 and could not see doing it any other way. So literally, and plus I'm paying him, right? So I know what he's being paid, and I know he wouldn't be able to afford us. And we're not overly expensive. We're certainly competitive now. And I realize how many thousands of dollars of camp he has gotten, but I feel all year long, we're getting that in return. He doesn't know the meaning of the word no. And there's not many staff people who you could look at and say that about, right? So anything we need, he knows is ultimately going to benefit his children along with everybody else's. So I can never see doing anything else with his situation. Other people, we're starting to change our thinking.
Yeah. Hence the phone call that Joe made to me. So, all right, before we go on, I just have to give a shout out to one of our sponsors, Camptivities. So, scheduling affects every camper and every staff member's summer. It's hard. It's easy to make mistakes. It takes a ton of time, and bottom line, scheduling is hard, but it does not have to be. So let Camptivities help you create a balanced and engaging schedule without the mistakes and without those long nights and late nights. Camptivities does auto scheduling, camper scheduling, group scheduling, lecture scheduling, manual adjustments, over 50 reports, tons of customizable settings, and so much more. If you're looking for a better way to schedule this summer, you should give them a buzz. They'd love to show you the next big thing in camp. Visit camptivities.com. Set up a time to chat. Our buddy Ryan Rosen and friends, let them help you get away from your desk and back to camp. All right. So yeah, let's talk about some of the pitfalls in this, because look, the benefits are wonderful. They're sort of obvious. You have these committed people, right, that are going to come back year after year, even though they might rather go to the beach and get a shore house. Their kids are like, no, we're going back to Spark, right? And they're coming. So, but some of the issues that happen, we were talking about the communication thing. That's certainly one, and it's a two-way thing, right? We were talking about like the staff contacting that parent about their kids, but to me, the even tougher one is the parent that has to sort of forget that they're a parent, which is basically impossible, right? During the camp day. So, what I tell our camp parents, I say, hey, listen, like you're a parent. There's no way around it, right? I know you can't help yourself to some degree. And if your kid's walking by, you want to give them a quick hug, that's fine. But like, that is it, right? And I don't want you going up to the counselors and giving them crap about things either. Like, that's a huge thing. Like, you don't want your counselors looking over their shoulder every 2 seconds because they have staff kids in their group. And Jay, I don't know about you, but at Liberty Lake, staff kids tend to end up in the same group because they sort of become friends because they come here after year. So there's almost like a staff kids group. And of course they want the best counselors, which is another story. But yeah, those are some of the pitfalls that I'm thinking. If you guys want to bring up any other that stick out to you?
I would definitely echo everything that you said. Some parents who, try to forget that their kids are at camp. It's near impossible. So I've seen parents that want to go and have lunch with their children, which doesn't work.
Yes, but this is the thing. Unless you tell them, I've done this long enough, unless you tell them specifically that they can't do that, it's just a normal, instinctive mother hen thing to do.
Yeah, and we've always had like a pre-camp like parent orientation, just like a short Zoom meeting, and it's been a little bit informal. And I think this year one of our goals is to just formalize it more. I'm excited to see your letter that you sent to families, because we might replicate something like that. But yeah, just to be a bit more clear, to have some of those concrete examples that we're talking about right now and outline them for those families. The other place that we've seen is the nurse. That's a little more understandable. Like, oh, I saw little Johnny at the nurse. Mom comes running up. I get that one more than having lunch, but
yeah, that's hard to avoid.
Something.
Right.
I had a
I'll tell
director.
you. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I had a director once that wanted to take advantage of, hey, mom's the boss, and wanted the counselors to, do special things for her child. And he played into that. Well, then my son, one of them, he ignored me. He pretended like he didn't know me. One of the counselors accused him of being like the other child, and he was horrified that they would ever think that he was not doing something on his own merit. So, as the staff parent, you also have to instill in your child what you want, what they're going to expect, and the standards you want them to carry out, which is almost harder. I mean, 2 out of my 3 ended up staff members later on, and wanted to make sure that they made it on their own merit and not because of me, and not because, I made the decision wholly the person who was hiring them, and wanted to not be in that mix at all.
That's a great point, Sam, to set expectations, not just with the staff, but make sure they set it with their own children. That's good. And by the way, Jay, you're gonna like my letter, but I like your idea of the Zoom. Actually, I think that's good, because that's more interactive than just handing them this letter saying that this is the way it is. One of the things,
on all fronts.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned right up front is super important. When I was back at North Shore Day Camp back in the 90s, when we had all those camp parents, was in the hiring process of these parents, that like the number one thing that I would say, like in being a parent, is I am hiring you for this position. It is a really important position. Like you guys were saying, like they're mostly positions that are sort of irreplaceable, right? They're not counselor jobs for the most part. I mean, Jay's, he's got a lot of preschool parents that are in charge of groups there, but a lot of them are administrators, specialists, right? Archery person. I don't have extra archery people laying around, right? So if you take this job, you need a plan B if one of your kids gets sick. Okay. I can't have somebody that is only here 3/4 of the time because the kids keep getting colds. Right. And if their answer is, well, I'm on my own, my parents live out, all my family members live out of town, all that kind of stuff, then like maybe it's not going to work. Like there has to be a backup plan, whether it's a babysitter that can swoop in or something. But this is a job. This is a job, right? This isn't like you're doing me a favor for being here kind of thing. Do you guys ever mention that kind of thing to them?
I'm going to now.
So that was my number one con from last year. And I no names, but it was the creative arts person that we had, and she was a home run in terms of her ability to work with our campers. But I would say every week she was missing at least a day, whether she was sick or her child was sick, and she had no alternative.
I got ones where like the dog is sick,
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And to the point where as soon as the summer was over and we started talking about who we're bringing back, who we're going to send a letter to now, and there was no way I was inviting her back. And I feel terribly for two reasons. One, I'm losing a good staff person because I think she would come back in a heartbeat. I never really gave her any, grief for the amount of days she was out. And I know her kid had a blast. She loved it. But I've not been in communication with her since the last day of camp. I just can't afford the time off because of, as we all know, the ripple effect of what that does in a supervisory position
and
when that person doesn't show up.
And the same way you have like a high school kid or a college kid who's like, hey, listen, my parents said that I have to do this and I'm not going to be here, that kind of thing. Right. I get a mom telling me that their husband is telling me this, is telling them this, right? Like I get that a lot, that like the mom is at camp, she loves it, the kids love it, but dad has no idea what's going on at camp. And as far as he's concerned, his wife's working for less than minimum wage, and this is ridiculous, like that kind of vibe. And I get that struggle too. And it's almost like you need to explain this to your spouse, your partner before the summer starts, that this is a serious commitment, like, especially if you're a unit leader, and you're in charge of 100 kids or whatever, like that's, I can't put a floater in for that,
Right. Totally agree.
I do have one pro that we didn't mention. When you have kids of your staff in camp, they're undercover quality control agents, because they'll come home and tell you that this counselor who's schmoozing you is really not good to the kids. And you would have never known.
Yeah. When
if
your
you
own
didn't
kids
have an
aren't at
insight.
camp. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're your undercover agents, no doubt about it.
Inside
No,
men.
it's very true. And yeah, they're also, how many times have you had a situation where you hear about a kid that gets hurt and you rush down to the nurse's office and it's a staff kid and you're like, woo, all right, staff kid. I could talk to the staff person. Since they understand the variables of life at camp, but it's funny, Jay mentioned it earlier. Like I'm at the point where Jay is too, where it's like you're making decisions now based on, a spot in camp, or 2 spots at camp, or 3 spots at camp, or God forbid 5 spots at camp. Like 5 spots at camp is not going to happen for me. I can't afford that. Like I need these spots, and that will, after our next break, we're going to get into the compensation factor, that because sometimes you could sort of defray that to some degree mentally. So anyway, I got to give a shout out to our next our next sponsor, who's been with us since day one, ladies and gentlemen, is CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, the fine purveyors of the finest recreational, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Jay, have you ever bought stuff from CRS before? You must
Of
have.
course.
Like
Of
what?
course. Jumping pillow.
The jumpy. Tell us about jumpy pillow, because guess what? Jumpy pillows are not a big thing in Jersey. I think the Department of Health frowns on them. So tell us about the
Yeah,
jumpy
I mean,
pillow.
I can imagine they're not stoked on it. It's basically like a giant air castle, like bouncy house, but it's built right into your ground, and it looks really cool. It's definitely an eye catcher on tours. Families really love it. But yeah, it's a cool element that I've definitely seen at a few different campuses.
Yeah. So anyway, say hi to them at their next camp conference. They're at every single one. Our friend Rich Wills and the crew there in New Jersey and Wisconsin. It's crs4rec.com. They are serious about fun. All right. All right. So now what sparked the entire conversation, and I say spark
Good use of the
facetiously.
term.
Yes, yes. It's the compensation thing. So I put a thing out on the summer day camp professional page. I think my man Kurt Jackson runs that still. Thank you for doing that. It's like the home for the day camp people on Facebook. And I put a poll, and I was like, do you compensate them? Do you not compensate them? Is it exchange? Is it barter? All that kind of thing. And as expected, it was literally all over the place. So you have camps that I would consider myself pretty hardcore about it. My situation is that I basically defray their pay. So if I was going to pay somebody, let's say I was going to pay somebody $4,000, I defray from them $350 per week per kid of camp. So if they have 2 kids, that's $700 a week. So if they work 8 weeks, that's $5,600. This person's not getting paid. Okay. Or maybe if I feel like, okay, I'll give them a few $100, so they have travel money, go out to dinner a couple of times in the summer. But I'm also giving them, in my mind, a lot of tuition. 2 kids, at my camp, sibling discount, we're talking like it could be $11,000, which by the way is 1 kid at Jay's camp. So that's a lot of money. So I that's how I frame it. Now, then I talked to my buddy Jay. Okay, I'll let him speak for himself. But I'll tell you this, Jay is an extremely competitive staff area, extremely competitive, especially for like trained people. All right. So much so that he's going overseas and grabbing people. Okay. In Jay's area, there are how many private day camps within 20 miles? A dozen.
I wouldn't even
right?
know the number, but at least
Right.
a dozen.
Right. And they're all trying to get the same people. So Jay's a lot more generous for that because he feels like it has to be. But the way I look at it, when I'm framing the exchange to the parents is what they would have paid and all that kind of thing. And I have a parent with 3 kids that doesn't get paid. And I tell her all the time, she's the highest paid person in camp, plain and simple. And she knows it. And she's fine. And she comes back, and I'm sure her husband thinks she's crazy. But that's just the way it is. So, I'll go to you, Jay. And I'm going to save Joe towards the end because Joe is actually trying to come up with his formula. And he's listening to me and he's listening to Jay and he's listening to all these things. And now he's going to come up with what he's going to do, putting aside his maintenance guy. Okay. So go ahead, Jay. Tell us how you guys frame it.
Well, to your point, this is what works for us. It's our area. It's our, what works for us. And it's going to be different for everybody. But pretty much since I came into the role, we've been giving a straight barter kind of a deal to parents that do come and work at camp. So you come and work at camp, you get paid nothing, you get free tuition. It's a big value. Just as you said, you're one of the highest paid people here because you're getting that huge value. And some people recognize that value, some people don't, because maybe they wouldn't have sent their kids to Breezemont if they weren't working there. But yes, big value. As things progressed, though, we realized, and some people pointed it out to us, that it maybe wasn't the most equitable and fair model because we had one person working getting 1 free tuition and one person working getting 3 or 4 free tuitions. Or somebody who had 2 kids, one of their kids went off to sleepaway camp. They're not getting more now. So we ended up having to go back to the drawing board and kind of figure out what we could do to make this more fair. and also more generous because we were finding we were losing some of these parents to some of our other camps in the area. So what we decided to do was to place a number, a kind of a value of what we determined it costs us to take a kid to camp, and subtract that from what they would have earned. So let's just say it's $5,000 is what they would have earned if they worked at camp over the summer. For each child that they have, we'll subtract $2,000 to make that fair and equitable. Some people are walking away with 1,000. Some people are walking away with 3,000. Some people actually technically owe us some money at the end of the summer. And there's not that many people that have 3-4 kids, so that's been small conversations here and there, but they're accepting of that, and that works for them. So again, this is what's worked for us. It feels more fair, it works better for us, and we were able to see our families, our parents, walk away with a little bit of money in their pocket, which then they are probably just going to end up using to tip their own kids' counselors at the end of the summer too.
Hopefully, yes, hopefully. Sam, what happens in the land of recreation?
Originally, when my kids were little, the benefit was part of our salary. So we got it for free. Camp before and after school and preschool were all free. Well, then maybe 10 years ago that changed, and you had to work 600 hours before you got any discount. And we're looked at as like an exercise class, like any other program at the park district. So you get 20% off after you work 600 hours. So if you're only camp and not my before and after school program, you never get the benefit. But if you work year round at my before and after school and then camp, then you start getting that 20% off. So yeah, they tried it for a while where it was considered taxable income, and they just did the tax part, and then they gave that up. And so now this is the model we have. So 20% after you work 600 hours.
So hold on. Do you have any staff parents that work for you that are seasonal, that are just seasonal? I mean, seriously, I wouldn't
no.
do it. Yeah,
No,
I wouldn't
none
do
that
it.
are just seasonal. Yeah.
Oh man, that's terrible. They need
And
to fix that.
I'm lucky that most of my directors their kids had grown up before that law came into effect, because they wouldn't have stayed with me. They wouldn't have been able to
Well,
afford
listen, if you need any of the three of us to testify to the board of directors of the park district, whatever the heck it is, supervisory board, that's criminal, I think.
Yeah. My one girl is on state aid that has her kid coming to camp. We get paid by the state for her child because she can't afford the other 80%.
Oh, that's
what
rough.
we pay her.
That's rough. So by the way, this survey, when I say it was all over the place, there were like small nonprofit camps that were like, we just give full tuition and pay people. And then there was private camps that do that. And then there was people that pay nothing. And then there's Sam's situation. It really is, it is an interesting topic. So what do you think, Joe? What are your thoughts? What are we going to do at Camp Spark 2024?
So this is where we're grandfathering in anybody returning who had free tuition and full pay in the past. We've already hired 2 parents who will be sending their kids to us, and they'll be working with us. So where we landed was, we're going to take a third of their child's tuition and subtract that from the pay they would have made. So, it seemed like good math at the time. And if we get to the point where, as you have, and it was very interesting when you and I discussed this, where, you can have it where they're really not being paid, that, yeah, we would give them, I guess, what would be called at that time a stipend at the end of the summer, which hopefully would have at least covered their gas and their transportation to and from camp, and thank them really for coming, right? So I'm not at the point yet, and I certainly get where you are and where Jay is in terms of, yeah, they're taking up spots of potential paying customers. But I'm weighing the quality of the support that I'm getting from that adult in any of those positions versus that. And We try not to go over 15 in any one group anyway, even though, as you know, in New Jersey, you can go up to 20 with 2 staff people, and we're 2 to 15 or sometimes 3 to 15. So I just, the reliability that I feel we get, and you talked about this earlier, Jay, it's parents who will then talk to parents. It's teachers who September through June
Oh
are
yeah,
talking to
the
parents.
best
And I
possible
find
thing.
that
Yeah.
incredibly invaluable. Right. So right now, the ones who are in that position in the past, they're still in that position. And each one has told me, you're going to have me until Jenny doesn't want to come to camp anymore. So it's funny that I'm going to have them as a valuable employee until their kid doesn't like us anymore, but or they graduate and want to go to overnight camp, right? But we're doing the 33% off of whatever their tuition would have been, and we basically have 3 tuition structures in terms of our 8 weeks. You know, pre-K and K is 1, first through 6th grade is 2, and then our teen program, because they travel, is another one. So depending on where their child kind of fits into one of those divisions, we're going to take at least 33% off and subtract it from what their salary would have been. So they're
I
still
like it.
getting
I like it. I
something.
like the 33%. I'm writing this down. I'm gonna see what that looks like, because that might work for me. That might be more equitable. I'm just thinking. You know, a
Well,
couple
you figured
things.
out yours based on your cost, right?
No, I don't know. I'm sort of winging it, I have to say.
Okay.
So a couple of things I want to mention. So when I first started working at a day camp, it was Harbor Hills Day Camp in the 90s, and Skip Fickness was the director, and he was amazing. He was just freaking awesome. And the thing that impressed me most in many ways once I started becoming a camp director myself was that at the time that I was there, he had parents working there whose kids had outgrown the camp, and yet they still stayed because they loved it so much. And when I had my first couple of parents do that, it happened recently here at Liberty Lake, because we started this camp 20 so years ago. That really is a great feeling, because most parents are just like what you were outlining there, Joe. They're like, we're going to be here till little Johnny is sick of it, or whatever, right? And then, in Jay's neck of the woods, where, I'm guessing 3/4 of the kids go to sleepaway camp, right? So some of these kids are out of there by, grade 3.
Yeah, we usually see our parent staff stay with us for maybe 4, 5, maybe 6 years. But this is the first year I can think of somebody off the top of my head that I have. Their child is going off to sleepaway, but they're sticking with us. But also on the flip side, if this parent staff member comes and works at camp over the summer and is like, wow, that was harder than I thought.
Yeah.
I won't do it again. But their kid loved it.
Yeah,
Who's
then
coming
they'll
back?
pay. Yeah. I usually get it the other way. I usually get the parents who are paying for their kids and go, hey, I can work at camp. That's usually what I get. And then I'm like, oh, do I want to lose 2 tuitions? Oh my God, for this parent, all depends on what they do. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Another thing I wanted to say was, there's a federal exemption of minimum wage in the United States of America for summer camps. Okay. But in the beautiful state of New Jersey, for private camps, there's not, as well as in Nevada and South Dakota. That's literally about it. So you guys can all, that are in other states, like Jay's in New York, he can just pay these people whatever he wants. It's not a big deal because of that federal exemption. Where for me to do these things, like the actual legal way that I'm supposed to be doing these, is that they're supposed to pay me the tuition and I am supposed to pay them the money. And that's how, like, if you talk to an accountant, that's what they would tell you. And there was one summer where I had a parent whose husband was an accountant that insisted on that happening. So it is a tricky little thing like that. But it is, like I said, it is a day camp thing and it happens everywhere. And that's sort of just the way it is. So yeah, that's that. And the only other thing that I missed saying, like one of the little downturn things, and this is something, Jay, maybe you could understand, is when a staff kid has taken a spot, right, and then the parent tells you, oh, hey, by the way, Jay, my kid's not coming the next 2 weeks. They're going to basketball camp, and you're just like, what? Because meanwhile, you closed out that group and you could have had someone be there, and the staff parent doesn't really understand the implications of running a business, So they're just like, what's the big deal?
We do have a caveat at the park district that if you sign up for a class and you cannot get your discount if the class is full. You either get kicked out of the class, and that goes for camp 2, or you pay full price if there's a customer that wants to be in it. So
Yeah. Well, if you come up with a formula like we're talking about, all three of us, the people who are doing it here, in which it's this equitable thing and it's by week and all that thing, or by the tuition that they pay, then if they don't come those certain weeks, then you just don't adjust their situation, because it's just like a camp parent that pays, and they tell you in the summer that the kid's not coming to. Okay, well, that's nice. We'll see him when he gets back. It's not like we're going to refund you at that point, kind of thing. Any other closing thoughts, my friends, about parents at camp?
I just want to say that next time, if we all meet again, Jay has to wear glasses. I'm very disappointed in the age difference. So Jay, you have to start. Your vision has to start going at some point. You need
declining.
to start wearing some glasses.
We have to start going on the decline.
Promise.
Yeah.
I'll do my best.
Well, listen, my man Boogie in the next room over here is 29. He was given for Christmas from my daughter those they're not prescription glasses, but they're the computer whatever
Right.
things cut down on the gamma rays going into your eyeballs, right? So even though he doesn't need glasses, he's got the vibe. So
So we'll have to get you some, Jay, for next time, so you have glasses.
Now,
That's
Jay,
perfect.
you just do your thing. You're doing just fine. Don't you worry about it. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate it, Jay and Joe. We want to thank the Go Camp Pro team, Camptivities, commercial recreation specialists, allowing us to bring this podcast to you. If you like what you hear, you should subscribe to the Day Camp Pod on your favorite podcast platform. Check out the show notes from all our episodes at daycamppodcast.com, as well as contact info for the show, for Jay, for Joe, for me, for Sam. All right. And thanks for listening and making yourself a better Day Camp Pro. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of the Day Camp Pod.